It started like any other quiet morning, the kind where routine lulls you into a false sense of comfort. The sunlight filtered through the blinds just the same. The coffee brewed with the same hissing sound, and yet, when I turned around, there was an envelope placed on the kitchen table, deliberately, noticeably, and ominously. My name, written in her handwriting, the same cursive letters that once signed birthday cards and love notes, now marking what felt like the beginning of war. Opened it with shaking fingers and read words that felt sharp enough to cut through. Bone, I want a divorce. I also want the house. No explanations, no discussions, just a line at the bottom stating her lawyer would be contacting me shortly. For the first few seconds, I couldn't breathe. My throat closed up, not in sadness, but in disbelief. We'd built that home together, brick by brick, memory by memory, and now she was declaring it hers. I knew things hadn't been perfect lately. We'd grown distant. Our conversations had turned to sighs and silences, but nothing in her behavior had suggested she'd go this far, this coldly, this suddenly. What she didn't know, however, was that I'd felt the storm coming. Long before she thought about her exit plan, I had started building one of my own, not out of vengeance, but survival. I didn't argue. I didn't text her back. I didn't chase or plead. Instead, I sat down and opened a folder on my computer titled What If? And then I clicked open the first document I'd created 6 months ago. The document was a roadmap: steps, contingencies, evidence, and backups. I wasn't paranoid. I was cautious. Because when the person you share your life with begins treating you like a guest in your own home, you pay attention. When affection becomes avoidance and warmth turns into weaponized silence, you start keeping track. So I had. I'd saved emails, taken photos of bank documents, quietly recorded conversations where she casually discussed draining our joint account just in case. She called it hypothetical venting. I called it a warning sign. 6 months ago I started preparing for a fallout I hoped would never come, but knew might be inevitable. I set up a separate account and began transferring my salary incrementally. I scanned and stored copies of everything: mortgage papers, tax documents, even receipts for the upgrades I'd paid for around the house. Her lawyer might argue sentiment, but the paper trail would argue fact. The house wasn't hers, and I'd funded more than half of its purchase and renovation. Over the next few hours, I forwarded the letter to my own lawyer, a man named Carson, who'd handled a friend's contentious divorce last year. Carson responded in under 20 minutes with 2 words. Let's talk, and we did. We talked for over 2 hours, and by the end of it, Carson had outlined a strategy that would not only protect me, but possibly leave her with far less than she expected. She thought I was helpless. She thought she'd deliver the first blow, and I'd collapse. But what she didn't know, what she never bothered to consider, was that I was quietly watching everything, and now it was my move. Days after sending the letter, leaving behind a hollow echo of the life we once had. I didn't try to stop her. She took her clothes, some jewelry, and a few framed pictures, but curiously. Not the picture of us on the front porch, the one we took the day we got the keys to this house. I took that as a signal. She didn't want to remember the beginning, only wanted the ending. She moved in with a friend, someone I'd never met. Someone she'd vaguely referred to in passing months ago as just someone from work. I didn't ask questions. I didn't need to. Instead, I did what I do best. I observed. I waited. I documented. In the meantime, her lawyer began the usual tactics, emails dripping with entitlement. Formal requests to transfer the house deed solely into her name. Claims that she'd contributed emotional labor and upkeep. Even though she hadn't worked in over a year and most of the housework had become my responsibility, my lawyer filed a motion to freeze the asset transfer until the court could evaluate both sides. We also submitted documentation proving that I'd paid 80% of all household expenses, including the mortgage. But we didn't stop there. Carson dug deeper. He found out that the friend she was living with wasn't just a friend, it was someone she had opened a shared account with months before the divorce letter arrived. I wasn't surprised. Hurt, yes, but surprised. No, I'd known. Her late-night texts, the locked phone, the sudden interest in self-care weekends, it had all pointed somewhere. She thought she was moving pieces on a board I couldn't see. But I had the whole game mapped out. Now it was time to shift from defense to offense. We filed a motion to investigate potential dissipation of marital assets. Fancy legal term, meaning she might have been funneling joint money into an account she believed I couldn't trace. It worked. The court ordered a temporary financial review. Sure enough, within a week, we had records showing several large cash withdrawals from our joint account months before the separation, withdrawals she had denied under oath. That alone weakened her credibility, but Carson wasn't done. He compiled a timeline that showed inconsistencies in her financial claims and personal testimony. I kept my head down during the proceedings, responding only when necessary, appearing calm while the storm churned behind my composed exterior. Meanwhile, she began realizing the foundation she thought she stood on was built on assumptions and arrogance. Her lawyer started sending conciliatory emails, suggesting we settle amicably. But I wasn't looking for revenge. I wanted what I'd earned. Nothing more, nothing less. My plan wasn't to punish Hurt, was to protect myself. She had counted on me being emotionally wrecked, impulsive, desperate. She didn't expect me to be methodical, prepared, and one step ahead. The more the case unfolded, the more it became clear. The narrative she had built was cracking. Witnesses we called to testifying, neighbors, mutual friends. Even her own cousins spoke of her increasing coldness, her sudden detachment, and her confessions about having a backup plan. In court, perception matters as much as evidence. And right now, both were leaning in my favor. The court proceedings moved slowly, as they often do, but with each session, the balance shifted more in my direction. Her lawyer tried several last-minute tactics, arguing about emotional contributions, claiming that I was emotionally absent, even stating that my financial security meant I could afford to let her keep the house. But none of it held weight. Against documented evidence, consistent testimonies, and a calm demeanor that never flinched under pressure. Meanwhile, I had uncovered even more. Through mutual contacts and a bit of research, I discovered that she had not only opened a joint account with her new partner, but had also preemptively signed a lease for a new apartment in both their names before the letter she left me. The date of the lease signing became a key turning point in the trial. It clearly indicated premeditated intent, proving she had mentally and logistically exited the marriage long before telling me. That undermined her claims of sudden emotional distress or last-minute decision-making. But what rattled her the most wasn't just what we revealed. It was how quiet and composed I remained. No outbursts, no retaliation, no public shaming. I was the opposite of what she expected, and that scared her. The judge took notice. Every courtroom has its silent observer, and in our case, the judge seemed to grow more skeptical of her, with each contradictory statement she made, when her lawyer attempted to push for immediate possession of the house, citing emotional trauma. Carson countered with a calm but damning response, citing the timeline of events and financial records. The judge denied her request, ruling that the house would remain jointly owned until the final judgment. I saw the flash of disbelief in her eyes when the decision was read. She still believed she'd walk away winning simply because she demanded. Outside the court, things began to shift in more personal ways. Friends we once shared started drifting from her orbit. She had assumed that our mutual friends would default to her side, especially since she portrayed herself as the wronged party. But when the truth surfaced, when people saw the evidence and heard the timeline, sympathy turned to silence. I never spoke ill of her, not once. I let the facts speak for themselves. That restraint earned me unexpected respect from those who once thought we were the perfect couple. Meanwhile, she grew increasingly bitter. She sent me text messages filled with accusations, regret, and sometimes desperation. "You never fought for us," she wrote once. But the truth was, I did. I fought by hoping for us long before she decided to walk away. I fought by staying loyal, by listening, by noticing when things were falling apart. And when I realized she had already checked out of the marriage, I fought to protect myself. That wasn't betrayal, that was survival. The plan I had built wasn't a trap, it was a shield. Slowly, her legal stance softened. Her demands reduced. She started realizing that taking the house wouldn't be as easy as she thought. Not when I held all the records, the deeds, the maintenance logs, even the list of furniture bought with my personal account. Carson was meticulous, presented, each detail like a master chess player revealing a checkmate sequence. And yet, I felt no triumph, only closure inching closer with every motion filed. Every demand denied, and every layer of deception unraveled in front of the court. The final months of the process were quiet. She stopped replying to messages. Her lawyer became more formal and restrained. Gone were the arrogant tones, the veiled threats, the assumptions of easy victory. Instead, their team began pushing for mediation, a signal that they knew trial would not end in their favor. Carson advised we consider it not to concede, but to finalize things faster, to end the uncertainty. I agreed. Mediation gave her one last chance to act with dignity, to settle on terms that were fair to both of us. During that session, she sat across the table from me, visibly exhausted. Confident woman who had once left a letter on the kitchen table assuming she'd win everything was now quieter, less sure of herself. She mumbled through the opening statements, barely looking. Me in the eye, I didn't feel vindicated, felt sad. Sad that the person I once loved had chosen destruction over honesty, manipulation over partnership. We negotiated terms. She would get a car we owned and a financial payout, one far less than what she originally demanded. I would retain full ownership of the house, my accounts, and all property purchased with my income. The judge approved the terms within weeks. Just like that, it was over. The paper she had left behind that once declared war had become just another document in a sealed court file. The silence that followed was the loudest sound I'd heard in years. After the dust settled, life didn't suddenly become magical. There was no movie-like ending, no grand celebration. Instead, there was quiet. Peaceful, uninterrupted quiet. I stayed in the house, not because I needed to hold on to the past, but because I had earned it legally, emotionally, spiritually. I repainted the walls, changed the furniture arrangement, and boxed away memories I no longer needed. The porch. The photo we took, that Datha one she left behind, I kept. Not as a keepsake of love, but as a reminder of the storm I survived. Healing came in strange ways. In the smell of fresh coffee that no longer brought back pain, in the soft music that filled the evenings, in the slow realization that I was free, not just from her decisions, but from the version of me that stayed quiet for too long. People often ask me if I still believe in love, and I tell them yes, because love isn't the problem. Blind trust is. Nah, Veet is. But love, the real kind, is what pushed me to prepare, to protect, to persevere. She thought she broke me. She thought I'd crumble and beg. But all she did was reveal a strength I didn't know I had. No. Standing in the very house she tried to take, I see not the ruins of what we were, but the foundation of who I've become. Months passed, and I began rebuilding in more ways than one. New friendships formed, old ones returned, and slowly the emotional fog lifted. I even started dating anxiously, honestly. I was upfront with my story, not as baggage, but as truth. One person in particular stood out, kind, thoughtful, and entirely uninterested in my past wealth or property. We met at a bookshop of all places. She asked for a recommendation on a novel I had just finished, and the conversation flowed from there. No games, no masks. Just simple, honest connection. It was refreshing, even healing. She never once asked about my divorce or my house until I brought it up months later. When I told her the whole story, she didn't flinch. She just nodded and said, "It sounds like you fought to keep your soul, not just your stuff." That sentence stuck with me. Because in all the legal battles, the evidence gathering, the emotionless chess moves, what I really fought for was myself. My dignity, my sanity, and perhaps most importantly, my future. Not every day is easy, and scars don't vanish just because papers are signed. But the difference now is that I wake up with clarity. I look around my home and see not just walls and furniture, but victories. Quiet, steady victories. Eventually, word got back to me that she had moved again. The apartment she had once signed with her new partner didn't last more than a few months. I heard rumors through friends of friends, whispered in cautious tones that it didn't work out, that her partner had grown distant, that money had become an issue, that trust had eroded quickly. Ironically, everything she feared might happen with me had happened with someone else. But I didn't gloat. I didn't message her. I didn't post vague quotes or share sarcastic remarks on social media, because true closure doesn't need a witness. It lives quietly inside your chest. In the form of peace that no longer demands revenge or recognition, I had already won, not in court, not in assets, not in reputation, but in transformation. I had entered the fire confused and vulnerable, and walked out tempered and self-assured. On the other hand, was chasing a version of happiness that required someone else to lose. But joy built on destruction never lasts. And deep down, I think she knew that. That's probably why she never apologized, not once. Not even a message to say, I was wrong. Because admitting that would mean facing her own reflection. And some people would rather keep breaking mirrors than look into one. Still, I'd let go. I didn't need the apology anymore. The version of me that needed it was long gone, replaced by someone who didn't depend on others for closure or validation. I had my home. I had my name on the deed. I had my nights free of tears, my mornings full of clarity. And most of all, I had a future no longer tied to someone else's illusions. A year after the divorce was finalized, I hosted a small gathering. Not a party, not a celebration, just a simple dinner with people who had supported me through the storm. Close friends, my lawyer Carson, who had since become a personal friend, and even my brother, who had flown in from another city. As we sat around the table, laughing, sharing food, exchanging stories, I felt something I hadn't in years. Stability. Not the kind you fake on social media, not the picture-perfect illusion of happiness, but the quiet, unshakable kind that lives in the bones of your life. After dessert, Carson raised his glass and said, "To standing your ground with grace." It wasn't dramatic or overly sentimental, but it hit me hard, because that's exactly what the plan had been all along. Not to attack, not to destroy, but to stand calmly, firmly, with integrity. I gave a short speech, thanking everyone, and ended it with something I hadn't rehearsed. Sometimes the best revenge is no revenge at all, just living well and not letting bitterness own a single room in your house. That line got a few nods, some clinks of glasses, and a moment of collective silence. It was real. And that's how healing happens, not in one big cinematic moment, but in small, consistent realizations that you're no longer hurting, that you're no longer defined by what someone did to you, that you have built something entirely your own, and this time, it cannot be taken away with a note or a threat. Now, I walk through the house, my house, I no longer hear echoes of old arguments or feel the sting of betrayal in every corner. I see resilience in the living room, where I spent nights researching legal clauses. I see discipline in the kitchen, where I drank bitter coffee while preparing for battles she never thought I'd be smart enough to fight. I see strength in the study, where I kept documents, printed proof, and built the quiet resistance that saved me. But most of all, I see peace in the bedroom, where I now sleep without fear. Not everything was restored. Some things were lost along the way, innocence, naivety, maybe even some hope. But what I gained is far more valuable: clarity, maturity, and a deeper understanding of love, not the romantic kind, but the kind you owe to yourself. Love that protects, prepares, and never lets you give everything away without reason. If I could speak to the version of me from a year ago, the man who opened that envelope and read those cold words, I'd tell him this: you were never helpless, just hadn't activated your power yet, because sometimes being underestimated is your greatest weapon. They don't see you coming. They assume you'll fold. And when you don't, when you rise with quiet confidence, it terrifies them. She thought I'd collapse. Instead, I rebuilt. And not just my home, but my whole damn life.